this fucking game go full screen? Hello? The value of life. Fucking woman. There is no such thing. You bum. Uh, that title was for when I was playing Persona, you see. Where's the fucking game? Where do I pick the game? Hello? What am I streaming? Yeah, gaming, motherfucker. Game title, Mahotsu. Okay, it's Witch on the Holy Night, right? Witch on the whole. Not that one. There should be a never mind. Whatever. That's fine. Alright. Does this fucking game go full screen? Oh, music! Her home was nestled on the side of a mountain. Around it was nothing but inhospitable wilderness. She had no neighbors or childhood friends to speak of. Things like traveling to school or playing outside were more trouble than they ought to be. Indeed, with its pure water and bright stars, it was a place rich with memories both frustrating and halcyon. That was only during summer, though. Winters in those mountains were extremely frigid, each morning more severe than the last. Her father would drive her to the train station after waiting 10 minutes for the engine to warm up and the ice over windows to clear. Mongolia PogChamp.
キーを回してきてくれるかい
Father would savor his morning coffee, leaving her to venture outside and rev the engine. Out the front door she would go, traversing the garden with icy breath until she reached that old sedan. As always, she inserted the key, then started the ignition. The engine rumbled to life. Just as she proudly finished that humble task she'd done so many times before. That's quite the scream. That's quite the guttural scream of death. A shrill scream pierced the air. She knew, even though it wasn't human, that the feeble sound was a cry of agony. A few moments passed. Her father came out and opened the hood of the car. Creaking fan belts. A monstrous looking engine. And something that didn't belong. There was a cat. A mother by the looks of it. And her 2 kittens. The 3 cats had been huddling for warmth in the engine's compartment. Fucking Kino Nasu, the game just began, for fuck's sake! No! I've been hating on cats all day. Just to see this. The mother cat was missing its head. One of the kittens had been mangled beyond recognition by the engine belts and surely died instantly. The other kitten, its face half covered in blood, panted faintly, desperately clung to its mother, or rather the chunk of meat that had been its mother, with the last bit of life it could muster. Alright, there's a stark difference between the description and the picture I'm seeing, but I understand why.
かわいそうに。
Her father lamented their plight. The previous night had been especially cold. Arekta Dogwell. After he had returned home yesterday, the cats must have snuck under the hood, drawn by the warmth of the engine. They had slept next to the engine and awoke into a storm of spinning belts. Cars in the 80s were not sealed particularly well, so this was not unheard of.
いいんだ。が悪いんじゃないんだよ。
Her father's voice seemed distant. She could only make out a small tuft of the kitten's grey fur. The rest of it was caked in the blood of its mother and brother. I can see its skull. The fragile life of a speckled kitten. Trembling and possibly blind, it continued to nuzzle against its dead mother's chest. Man, piano in a Japanese game is never gonna go well now, is it? It's bound to fucking end in misery. This is the only this is literally the only outcome. Fuck.
待ちなさい。
She took the kitten into her arms and ran deep into the mountains to her grandfather's house. Was it because she was so overcome with regret? Or was it the shock of grief? Years later, she still wasn't sure. Fighting back the welling tears, she burst into her grandfather's workshop. Her grandfather was a magician who could do anything. She had never seen magic. She knew that magic was a fantasy straight out of fairy tales, but so was her grandfather. She had to find him. He was the only one who could help.
その子猫の運命を変えろという。
The cave-dwelling magician said indifferently. This kitten needs our help, she pleaded. Whether it was a simple task or a Herculean labor, her grandfather would not say. He simply granted the girl's childish wish like a machine. Before she knew it, however, she was holding a tiny corpse in her hands. Its fur was cold. The warmth of life had left its body, and the tears she had fought so hard to hold back poured from her eyes. Regret spread through her just like an endless grey sky. Can I make this? Is there any way to fucking make this? Yeah, I know how these things go, but backlog is what? Right trigger? Why? Why is backlog cool? A, B, Axis system anyways, backlog, panel advanced text, start, stop, scale, blah 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 blah.
徒労だったな。
We were too late.
結局元に戻すとは。
Her mind struggled to come to grips with what had just occurred. The last 10 minutes were a total blank. Who she met, what she had known. It was all as if it never happened. The only thing she was sure of was that life was once extinguished, can never return.
そこに誰かいるの？
That day, it was her mistake that gave birth to me. Wait, what the fuck is happening? um, Indeed. Whatever occurred that day, it was a day of nostalgia and longing. This is a fairy tale of 8 years ago, the day they first met, that no magic can ever bring back. Ren 2.0? This fucking art is incredible. Arrogant, greedy, and able only to destroy. I must be a wolf. Alright. This is very, 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 very fucking promising already. And this is also Kino Naso's, in some ways, his magnum opus, you could say, because this is the final game he made in that saga from 2000 to 2004. No, wait, this is after 2004, no? I used to think that Witch on the Holy Night came out in 2004, but it came out in 2012. So this is the final game he made. This is after Fate Extra. This is after all of that. This is a very, very, very experienced Nasu that wrote this. Actually, I wanna check when did this come out? Witch on the Holy Night. It was first released in 2012. No, 2012 is when it was first released. The remaster came out in December 14, 2023 for PC. An anime film adaptation by Ufotable has been announced. Holy fuck. That's exciting. I don't have regrets. There's no looking back. If my pride has left you behind, my sincere condolences. But at any rate, I suppose it's my fate to die at the heads of Little Red Riding Hood. At the hands of Little Red Riding Hood. Whew. Well, that was announced a decade ago. It's not gonna happen. No, 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 no. I think the Ufotable thing was announced a few years ago, no? Ufotable Mahotsukai no Yoru. Yeah, the official trailer number 2 came out in January of this year.
don't yet know when it's gonna come out though, I don't think. Issue is, it's only gonna be one movie apparently, so it might not be a good adaptation. I'm also scared to hope. Although Ufotable has not done a bad adaptation yet, to my understanding. Although then again, I did not play Fate's Day Night. But one can hope, right? One can hope. Either way, I'm playing Mahotsugai no Yoru. That doesn't change. And the visual novel is already looking to be very fucking good. I am, like, my asshole is clenched. I assume that one means chapter one, strange one. Brother, this game looks so fucking good. It was a quiet morning. From her bed, she could see the sky was an ashen watercolor gray. The thermometer displayed 43 degrees Fahrenheit, a rather unforgiving temperature for November. Her stomach woke her up with a growl, pathetically reminding her that she had completely missed breakfast. But lazy mornings like today's were, for her, a blessing. It was already well past 8 in the morning. On any ordinary weekday, tardiness would be unavoidable, but today, classes were cancelled in commemoration of the school's anniversary. Gratefully, she had every intention of taking it easy for the first time in ages. Outside the window was a gloomy grey, and it reminded her more of evening than morning. It wasn't a pleasant morning by any stretch of the imagination. But having been up all night until just 3 hours ago, she couldn't care less about the weather outside. দরজা বন্ধ করতাম কেন? তাও দরজা বন্ধ থাকা যায় না রুমে। তো বাতাস পাস হয় না জানালা দিয়ে, না দরজাটা খোলা রাখা লাগে। না, আমি তো দেখি হয় কিনা, আমার দম আটকে আসে রুমে। তোমার হচ্ছে আমার বেশি বাতাস লাগে। All she cared about was more sleep. As long as she could spend a morning in bed, that what was happening outside was of no concern to her. She shut the curtains, then closed her eyes and tried to let sleep reclaim her.
せめてあと2時間ぐらいは凡庸な夢を見ていられますように。
Blissful slumber found her soon enough. Her consciousness faded. However, her simple request would be mercilessly refused. That's strong wording for something like that. Cool. Faint but shrill sound lingered in her ears. It was the unmistakable ring of a telephone. Much to her chagrin, her eyes popped open out of habit.
こんな日に限って。
The telephone was situated in the foyer on the first floor. Answering it meant walking down a 30-foot corridor and going down a flight of stairs. In a sleep-deprived state, that distance seemed somewhere between incredibly far and astronomically far. হায় রে, এত fucking weak হইলে কেমনে হবে? The phone's incessant ringing continued. She knew the caller would eventually give up if she ignored it, but she chose to fight the urge.
アリス出ないの？
She thought her housemate would get it, but she soon had to abandon all hope. The realization struck her that her housemate did not have the day off from school and was likely in class at her prestigious little Hilltop Academy. Alice Kwonji, 5-star caster, I think. The caller proved incredibly persistent. The persistence made the volume of the ringing seem even louder.
ああ、もうせっかくの安眠を。
She was left with no choice but to get up, throw a top on, and leave the room. Maybe if it was Tsukihime, we would already get to see some. God, it's cold. Wait, I wasn't voice acting her fucking, okay. She rubbed her hands together to warm her numb fingers. The mansion's heating system was inadequate, to say the least, which meant that winter was the very worst of uninvited guests. Never more so than on a dreary morning as this, which one didn't need to use a thermometer to know how cold it was. The mansion sat in the mountains and was surrounded by dense forest. Winter always arrived here first, before moving on to nearby towns. The robotic ring of the telephone reverberated throughout the long hallway. The mansion's furnishings had been so perfectly maintained that it was made the place feel unlived. It seemed lonelier than it did splendid. Coupled with the dreary morning, it could have passed for a haunted house.
ま、幽霊屋敷そのものだけど、だいたい2人で住むには広すぎるのよ、この家は。
She counted more than 30 rings since it first began. The caller either had a lot of free time on their hands or had a good understanding of the house's circumstances. She had a strong hunch that it was the latter. The window above looked out onto a gloomy sky. Man, this ringing is getting fucking obnoxious. Just pick up the fucking phone, man. She hastened to catch the unrelenting ring in the act as soon as possible. In the act. Though she had a feeling that her happy morning might come to a close the moment she caught it. It was here that a series of incidents began. Apologies for the lack of romance to this tale, for whether it be objectively true or merely supposition. It is always from gloomy and unassuming beginnings that extraordinary events are set into motion. Yeah, it's always the gloomy mornings that take a turn for the worse, no? Ugh. The worst instances of your life tend to be pretty fucking cliche. I see she owns a few guitars. Takashi Takeuchi Kinoko Nasu. Classic. I think this was the last thing that they really went hard on as the, you know, OG duo. Before their shit became a lot bigger. Their entire fucking operation. Because FGO came out in 2016, but even before 2016 they had a lot of shit happening. Haga Keita! Why does that name sound familiar though? Man, this game looks incredible though. There's just something about the atmosphere that it's creating that makes you feel like something is about to happen. Something that's gonna fucking shake you to your core. And obviously the art is that this might actually be the best looking game I've ever played already. Because this art is just insane. I mean best looking visual novel, not game. Visual novels have an advantage there. But look at how beautiful everything looks. It's genuinely a world that you can... Oh my fucking god! Holy shit! That is insane! The rain had subsided somewhat by the time she reached the school gate. Sunlight seemed to be playing peekaboo behind the clouds in the distance. It looked like it might be cleared up by early afternoon.
と言っても私には関係のない話だけど。
The weather reflected her luck. On top of being forced out of the house at such an early hour, she had to suffer through a winter rain. But man, I fucking love winter rain. Getting a bad feeling about this. The sinking feeling she had only grew as she passed through the entrance and headed inside. This is, I believe, also the only thing Kinoko Nasu ever wrote with a female main character. She didn't encounter any other students along the way. Nor did she see anyone taking part in club activities either. The reception desk of the faculty room simply read, "Faculty closed." The school had given all of its students day off. Except those explicitly summoned, like her. The fact that irked her more and more as the minutes passed. She opened the door to the faculty room and headed toward the desk she had visited a number of times before. The man at the desk wore a plain shirt and suit that were nonetheless neatly pressed. Slim framed glasses adorned his face, giving off an amicable yet cunning air. The mild-mannered image in this mid-twenties man presented clashed with the cigarette he smoked. He didn't appear to have noticed her yet. Literally me, mild-mannered with a cigarette. It's not even mild-mannered, it's like mild-mannered, you know? The softest, nicest individual you'll ever meet, with the contrast of a cigarette in his mouth.
Yamashiro sensei.
That is not Yamashiro, that is Yamashiro. Amnelix again, oh. H koi. Dog shit translation. She closed the door with a bang. Showing no response to the sudden sound, Mr. Yamashiro lifted his head.
やあ、おはよう、青崎くん。
That looks like a
要件は聞いている
scumbag.
かな？
I feel like I'm looking at a scumbag.
はい、1時間前に自宅で事前に何の相談もなく。
Having graduated from this high school himself, Mr. Yamashiro was not much older than the rest of the students. For that reason, the students preferred him over the other teachers. He always had something interesting to talk about and kept conversations casual. In fact, he seemed more like an older student than a teacher, but she unfortunately didn't share her fellow students' fondness for him. She was of the opinion that teachers should come across as more austere, like an iron fist that could inspire both love and hate in equal measure, not a buddy to joke and pal around with. She was the exact opposite of how she felt the teacher should be. It was only natural that a manner towards him would be forced and unfriendly. Not that she'd ever been wired to make friendly small talk.
はあ、今日もご機嫌斜めみたいだね、君は。
それは先生の気のせいです。今日だけ特別という話ではありませんから。
The matter-of-fact answer perfectly matched the displeasure displayed on her face. Her bad mood from having to get up early and the tiredness from staying up late must have collectively made her look positively adversarial.
そうならいいんだけどね。彼にはそう辛く当たらないでくれよ。僕らじゃ正直どう扱っていいかわからないところもあるし。
先生、その件ですけど、私まだ詳しい話を聞かされていないのですが。
As Mr. Yamashiro met her piercing eyes, he finally understood the reason behind her tone and slowly put out his cigarette.
電話じゃあなんて聞いたの？
転入生の紹介をするとだけです。理由も脈絡もない説明でした。
One of Yamashiro's eyebrows went up, impressed with the brevity of her answer. He could see that she was angry not because she had been called to school on her day off, but because she hadn't been told why she was here. Mr. Yamashiro chuckled sympathetically.
先生、これが笑い話ならそろそろ帰っていいでしょうか。
いや、ごめんごめん、謝るよ。冗談じゃなくて真面目な話なんだ。
本当に転入生の問題で。
うん、訳ありというか難しいというか。彼宗十郎くんというんだけど、ちょっといろいろとずれていてね。僕らが案内してあげるより同世代の君の方が適任だと思ったんだ。
She threw him an unamused look. It was negligent of them to be pushing teaching duties on her, but she did wonder how exactly this transfer student was peculiar. Maybe he meant the student had behavioral problems or was difficult somehow. But peculiar, she didn't have the slightest idea what that meant.
ずれてるなんてそう使わない表現だけど。
She had her doubts, but swept them aside for now. This wasn't the time to get distracted by more concerns. The fact remained that this conversation was all the peculiar she could handle and she needed more information. She was already beginning to fantasize about saying no and curling up in her warm bed at home.
一つ質問があります。
Why is there a close-up of the chest of a fucking high schooler? Stop.
何？あ、学年は君と同じ2年生だよ。性格は落ち着きがあって人の話をよく聞くタイプ。裏を返せば覇気がないとも取れるけど、それならそれで付き合いやすいだろ。青崎くんとはクラスは違うけど、きっと仲良くな。
そういったことは本人から直接聞きますし、測ります。そうではなく、なぜ私なんでしょうか。
Her tone was still stern. It was clear that she was willing to cooperate. She had decided to put her feelings of dissatisfaction aside and focus on the task at hand. Forcing herself to act empathetic in spite of her self-absorbed nature was something she was used to. Paradoxically, this force of will was also the reason teachers put so much faith in her. To a point. At times that strength shattered expectation, and on those occasions they were left with no choice but to treat it like a natural disaster and weather it until it passed. That was how Mr. Yamashiro had come to deal with her as over the past year.
もう一度だけ聞きます、山城先生。それでなぜ私なんでしょうか。
Pressured by a question with a clear yes or no answer, he answered.
うん、それはね、別に青崎くんが先生方に敬遠されているのと同じぐらい信頼されていて、学校のためなら教師も生徒も一緒くたに切って捨てる鉄の生徒会長だからじゃないよ。
Man gave a lot of lore there interesting.
それ以外にこんな呼びつけを受ける理由はないと思いますけど。
Her eyes did nothing to hide the disbelief as she glared at him. Strength far beyond that of an ordinary 17-year-old girl, coupled with the youthful beauty of one. What the fuck? Mr. Yamashiro let slip a genuine smile admiring the miraculous balance of qualities.
いや、責務だけでいいなら僕がやってるさ。この人選に関しちゃ教師や生徒会長といった役職も関係ないよ。なんていうか、こんな頼みを損得抜きで聞いてくれるのは君だけだと思ってね。適任ですからと強く推薦したわけ。
In other words, he knew she wouldn't say no.
山城先生。
So bad, so she's a pushover.
うわ、怖っ。もう睨まない睨まない。言ったろ、僕にはともかく彼には笑顔でって。とまあ納得してくれたならすぐに移動しよう。もうずいぶん待たせてしまっているからね。それと雨の中ご苦労様。帰りはもちろん車で送るよ。
Mr. Yamashiro stood up gracefully. I'm good, thanks, she replied before turning and walking out of the faculty room. He had been waiting for about an hour. While he did, the rain shower lightened into a drizzle. His mind wandered as he listened to the sound of the raindrops. The room was filled with neatly arranged rectangular tables. He was the only one there. Quite some time had passed since he had been brought to this room and asked to wait. Even the best behaved student might have grown dissatisfied or anxious with the situation by now, but the boy stuck to his spot like a scarecrow. He was chilled to the bone. It was the end of November, and the low temperature in the morning had marked the start of winter. Why is it November in-game and November IRL as well, man? The room was not much warmer. The heater hadn't been turned on. Either he'd missed the teacher telling him to turn it on, or he'd never seen one in his life. He breathed lightly on his freezing fingers as he aimlessly surveyed his surroundings. So he's me, sitting in a fucking hot room, sweating all over the place just because I can't be bothered to turn on the fan when I'm the only person in class. Or a cold room, just cold as fuck. Can't be bothered to close the window or some such. Which has happened many times because I'm the first to class in both Salvation and Farhan Sir's class. Even when Farhan Sir had other students. What the fuck am I doing with my life?
হইতাছেটা কি?
I accidentally turned on auto scroll back there and got cucked. Cool. He breathed lightly on his freezing fingers as he aimlessly surveyed his surroundings. This dreary place was apparently a meeting room. The other students might have considered it a wonderful place to meet, but to him it was drab and overly spacious. It was a lifeless place that reminded him of an arid cave. Stuck in this cold room with absolutely nothing to do, his mind turned to what they wanted to discuss. Unable to come up with a solid answer, he returned his attention to the sound of the rain. The rain hardly resembled the rain in the mountains, though he could still recognize it, barely. Its smell and sound were harsher, but at the end of the day, rain was still rain. So in this world, alien as it was, could have something in common with the mountains. That trivial detail perked him up a little. He liked how the town looked, soaked in rain. Naturally, he preferred sunny weather, but he liked rain in its own way. The fog from the rain had soaked up the scent of the soil, and it reminded him of home. It was at times like these that he was able to numb the anxiety the city gave him. But then he let out a discouraged sigh. How pathetic. He'd already been here for 2 weeks, and thoughts of his hometown still made him sad. Perhaps feeling that he was being unfair to his new life, he composed himself and continued to wait patiently. As if having a passion for distractions, his attention returned to the sound of the rain once more. Waiting like this didn't seem to be particularly hard for him. He quietly endured the numbing cold and the hour alone with calm, deep breaths. As the saying goes, good things come to those who wait. A strong point of his or not, he was astonishingly patient. It was certainly keeping him out in this moment, helping him out. She, on the other hand, was livid. The profile of the transfer student had been explained to her on her way to the meeting room. She was told he had lived his whole life up in the mountains without any electricity. That meant more than half of civilized society would have been an utter mystery to him.
なんて絶望的な断絶。戦後どころか戦前の話じゃない。ロビンソンにも程がある。
Who? Robinson Crusoe? Is that like the Castaway or something guy from the movie? She had every right to be angry. What do you mean every right to be angry? Just because he hasn't been in, civilized society before? Does that mean everybody was angry with Mr. Ronindo Arif when he first went to Australia? His village had apparently remained isolated in the mountains for many years. Contact with villages in the foothills of the mountains only occurred once a month or so, which is unfathomable in modern Japan. Although expressways and Japan Rail, the old national railways, now span the country like arteries, it wasn't entirely impossible for mountain villages like his to exist. But you couldn't imagine how someone born to such a circumstances would think or live.
電気がないって、村に行き渡っていないだけで公衆電話ぐらいはあったんですよね。
What a spoiled bitch.
なかったそうだよ。こっちに暮らすようになってまず驚いたのが電話だそうだし。
I didn't have a phone when I was 17.
電話って便利ですねなんて真顔で言われてね。そういえばそうだなぁと再確認させられたぐらいだよ。
She shot a sidelong glare his way as he laughed. It seemed that the naivete of the country boy had cheered up Mr. Yamashiro a bit.
駐在もいないってことか。うちも実家は山奥ですから、電気が通っていないのはありえないとは言いませんけど。そいつ、学校も知らないんですか？
うん。どんなものかは知っていたそうだけど、実際来るのは今日が初めてらしい。それで緊張していたのかな。あまり会話も弾まなかった。ああいうのも野生児っていうのかな。狼に育てられた狼少年みたいな。いや、探検隊の話だね。
The fuck?
怖いな、青崎くん。冗談だって。そう睨まないでくれ。大丈夫。話してみた感じ、おとなしい子だったから。なんていうか、言葉の通じない小動物みたいな感じ。
山城先生、その例え気休めになってませんから。
As she gave her blunt reply, she tried to emulate in her mind what life without electricity would be like, but the thought of it took her sour mood from bad to worse. After all, it was a world she had never known. I've known that world before. I live in Bangladesh. That's my daily life. She could understand why the teachers had given up. She too wanted to give up and return to her warm bed, but her good-for-nothing pride was holding her hostage. Not only did the teachers believe she was up to the task, but she also believed she could do it. It wasn't that easy to go back to her on her word, no matter how bad things looked after the fact. She walked along the hallway, the rain pattering in the background. The meeting room was already in sight. With a furrowed brow, she fixed her long hair in anticipation of meeting the unknown stranger within. Her elegant strides were like those of a confident general going into battle.
いや、青崎くん、君を信頼してる僕だけど、念のため確認しておくよ。なんていうか、優しくね。できれば笑顔とか作れないかな。
作り笑いは苦手です。一応努力しているつもりですが。
ああ、そうなんだ。それはよかった。いやー、ほんとよかった。青崎くんにも苦手なものってあったんだね。
Another close-up of her chest. What are they doing? Miss Yamashiro's shoulders slumped the second they reached the meeting room. As he put his hand on the door, his eyes seemed to say to her, "Be nice, please." This only made her more irritated.
分かってるわよ、愛想が悪いってのは。でも笑顔なんて意識して作るものじゃないんだし。だいたいそういうインスタントな人付き合いなら飛び丸の方が向いてるって。
She sighed about her social shortcomings, but then it occurred to her that being called into school on a day off while sleep deprived wasn't anything to smile about anyway. She also thought the person responsible for this mess would be better off attending elementary school. Might not be his fault, but neither was it her duty or obligation to do this teacher's work for them. At the very least, they could have used their brains and organized all this on a normal school day. Another complaint she wanted to voice later.
いや、というか敵。なんであろうと敵。
敵。
悪いけど、情状酌量以前に敵。間が悪いのはお互い様っていうか、ほんと、なんでよりにもよってこんな忙しい時に。
Busy? You're busy sleeping. Her pounding heartache from a lack of sleep had boosted her aggression by 10%. No matter how harmless the guy on the other side of the door may be, anyone who disturbed her sleep was the enemy. And just as she was reaching peak annoyance, Mr. Yamashiro opened the door to the meeting room. The room slowly slid into view. She didn't care for formalities, just looked straight ahead and stormed into the room, found herself face to face with the most unusual opponent. Before we go on, let's see it from another perspective. Turning back the clock just a little, you don't have to do anything. For some, these words are a priceless luxury. For others, they are unbearable torture. For the proactive girl, it was definitely the former, though she'd be too suspicious of the motives of anyone giving her such a gift to accept it. For the passing boy, it was definitely the latter, a bitter thorn that made him homesick, though at this very moment his mind was still distracted with the wait for his face to reveal any discontent. That was a fucking. That was a mind twister, not a tongue twister. Got confused for a second about what they meant. He maintained perfect posture as he stared at the grey sky. He had already waited a whole hour, but figured they must have had their reasons for making him wait. And as long as he had the sound of the rain to soothe him, he could keep on waiting.
でもそろそろ9時を過ぎるのか。どうなんだろ
He had been vaguely keeping track of the time as he listened to the rain. Due to the holiday, the school building was completely silent. Except for the patter of the rain on the window. So it's 9 o'clock right now, and our main character lost out on breakfast, which means breakfast is usually eaten at 7 in her household. Perhaps 7 or 8, I guess. Perhaps even 6, who knows? I mean, I am very used to eating breakfast at 6, so I can't bitch about that. Not that I do that these days. The moon felt as damp as the air. It was then. He heard the heavy clatter of footsteps
よかった
approaching.
忘れられているかと思った。
He could hear 2 sets of footsteps, one heavier set belonging to an adult. He breathed a sigh of relief as the door slid open.
すまないね。随分とお待たせしちゃって。
The first person he saw was a man wearing glasses and an awkward smile. That's Mr. Yamashiro, the one who brought me here.
ってあれ里中先生いないんですか？ひどいなあ。話し相手になってあげてと言ったのに。
Mr. Yamashiro scratched his head, looking increasingly apologetic. And then from behind him, with a tight-lipped expression that made it clear she didn't want to be there, a dark-haired girl with a determined look in her eyes appeared. I guess eyes are illegal. Alright, eyes. Hi. The first pair of eyes that we get to see in this game so far. Still can't see Aoko's eyes though. Sojiro Goat. The sound of the rain on the window faded into nothingness. That's when he knew. This was how it felt when time stood still. Bro fell in love. Wagyu eyes. She is Skathak before Skathak existed. Looks very, very similar to Skathak. The difference is that Skathak's eyes are red. was anyone's guess. The boy was everything she expected a naive country boy to look like. However, she felt something she couldn't understand. His eyes widened slightly as if taken aback. The reason was obvious. Putting his feelings into words was a different matter altogether, so we will never know exactly what he experienced in that moment. That's when it hit him. He sensed he'd been touched by the hands of destiny.
紹介するよ。彼が転入生の静木宗十郎くんで、こっちの彼女が静木くんの案内役。
Pro is taking too long to recover. I say this from experience because I also was dumbstruck when I first saw Dwayne The Rock Johnson, but I recovered instantaneously because that's what you do. That's who you gotta be to be a man.
うちの生徒会長で休日を押して新しい仲間の案内役を買って出てくれた青崎青子くんだ。
His voice and the sound of the rain seemed distant. This is how they first met. Such was their start, for better or worse, like the ephemeral beauty of fireworks. It is commonly believed among the students that Aoko was always in a foul mood. But this gossip was 90% prejudice, as Aoko simply didn't have time to be irritated 24/7. The reality was she simply didn't want to explain herself all the time, and therefore seemed angry about something, obvious or not. This idle gossip did, however, lead to her earning the title of one of the school's 7 deadly threats. The remaining 10% of the gossip was right on the mark. Aoko herself often had the feeling that a tendency to feel animosity towards harmless things was akin to what a chronic headache sufferer might experience. Huh? Is this game attacking me? What the fuck? Today fell under that 10%. For today her anger was pure and her childish and selfish display was befitting of her actual age. The meeting room was dimly lit, awash in the colors of the rain. To reduce electricity costs, school regulations forbid the use of lights during the day. This is the setting the three of them found themselves in. Her first impression was that his calm demeanor reminded her of a field of wildflowers. In spite of his perfect posture, his overall air felt placid, tame even. And though describing him as meek would be going too far, at the very least he was passive. Even through his uniform, she could see that he was thinner than average. His dark hair was unkempt, and he came across as a wholly forgettable boy. If she had to look at him in a more positive light, she would describe him more a young man than a boy. It was his calm demeanor that made him seem more mature. Was that the cause of Aoko's reasonless reaction? He seemed almost too at home in the meeting room, and she was left with the impression that it was her and the teacher, not this outsider, who were the guests here. She felt an unidentifiable aggravation brewing within her, almost as if her right to be here was in question. What the fuck? Aoko felt herself raising her natural defenses.
信じられない。私、今わけもなく怒ってない。
Average woman behavior. She hated not understanding things, her own emotions in particular. Pained her less than you would imagine for a perfectionist like her, but it still nagged her like a thorn in her side.
いやーほら青崎くん挨拶してあげなくちゃ。
Mr. Yamashiro's attempt to relieve the tension was equally irritating.
挨拶？
After casting a nasty glance in the teacher's direction, Aoko turned to face the boy. From an outsider's perspective, it might have looked like a stare down. And in that instant, the culmination of her emotional state hurtled toward the innocent boy and skewered him.
Yeah, 待たせたね、しずきくん。
Hearing his name, Sojiro came to his senses. His stunned gaze shook loose. He took a deep breath to clear his head. Chalking it up to nerves, Mr. Yamashiro broke out a smile and turned to the girl standing beside him.
紹介するよ。彼が転入生のしずき宗十郎くん。で、こっちの彼女がしずきくんの案内役。うちの生徒会長で休日を押して新しい仲間の案内役を買って出てくれた青崎青子くんだ。
Having been introduced by Mr. Yamashiro, the girl took a step forward. Her eyes were merciless. Her stare an unspoken threat to violence and trample her opponent. Sojiro, on the other hand, managed to keep his own composure despite the shock at how confrontational she appeared. She had never been greeted quite like this before, but supposed mistakenly that this was how people greeted each other in the city. Supposed. The exchange must have looked quite dramatic to an onlooker. A girl ready to brawl, an earnest country boy, desperate to understand. It is a murderous limbo, especially for anyone in the room with them. Like Mr. Yamashiro, for example. Poor guy. While he had thought he had made the right decision in choosing an honor student to help him out, he was in an inexplicably bad mood, and the tension in the air was undeniable. It was at this moment that he realized his failure. His realization had come far too late. One false move, and this girl, for whom no problem was too large, would becoming a storm that would rock the very foundations of the school. Just as the almighty Joker card could bring either fortune or disaster, the sole teacher who had been present at the time would come to bear the blame for the scandal that ensued.
いけてる。二人とも気は合うようだね。
This man is not helping. This man is so bad at fucking
それじゃあ
reading the
僕は
situation.
この辺でいいかな。
Man is running the fuck away. Mr. Yamashiro laughed nervously as he crept toward the door.
僕は職員室にいるから終わったら来るように。いいかい青崎くん。くれぐれもだぜ。なんていうか生徒会長としての度量の広さをこの際僕に信じさせてほしいかな。
Yamashiro left, leaving the two in a locked-eyed state, one in which one set of eyes was doing all the glaring. All that remained in the room was an artless boy and a cross-armed guarded girl. The two lingered in silence. They resembled shogi players agonizing over their first moves, though it was only Aoko who was reading so much into the situation. She decided to put her irritation aside for the time being. With no reason to feel revulsion for him in the first place, she sighed deeply and faced Sojiro.
まあいいわ。山城先生がヒルアンドンなのは今に始まったことじゃないし。それであなた名前は？
Her tone was nothing if not reproachful, though he had done nothing to offend her. But the boy failed to pick up on it. Capable of such venom himself.
ああ、しずき宗十郎かな。君は青崎さんだったね。
For whatever reason, he came across as happy in his response.
さんはいいわ。柄じゃないから。 こっちはしずきくんでいい？
いいって何が？
だから呼び方。くん付けでいいかって聞いてるの。
うん
何よ、おかしなこと言った？私。
いやすごく
The boy replied immediately as if it was a natural response, but quickly second guessed himself.
いやいいんだごく一般的なんだろうしずきくんで頼む君は青崎でいいんだよな
よろしく。
She followed her blunt reply with a swift turn away from him. While she was hardly thrilled at the prospect of the task at hand, it had been entrusted to her, and it was her personal policy to see it through to the end.
悪いけど優しくしてあげる気はないから。時間も惜しいし手早く行くわよ。
それは助かるやっぱり時間は大切だ
Aoko's blunt rancor was lost on him once again. Humans tend to be overly conscious about being ignored, whatever form that takes. But despite being peeved at landing none of her attacks, Aoko did her best to act professional and directed her guest into the hallway. There was no sunlight in the hallway, nor any sign of life. This was more like a prison than the cave that was the meeting room. As it dawned on Aoko that the hallway matched her mood, she sighed once again.
まず聞いておくけど、山城先生から聞いたことは理解してる？
ああ学校の仕組みについては分かったこの建物全部に同い年の人間がいるなんてちょっと想像できないけど
そう、よかったわね。
Aoko rubbed her forehead. The soldier kid had no idea what he was in for. Apparently all he'd heard about school was that it was a place where a lot of people met to study. High school teachers imparting to students their knowledge in various fields of study while fostering discipline and creativity. But never did Aoko imagine that she would have to explain the concept of school itself to someone. Yes, fundamentals were important, but this was absurd. She had serious doubts whether he could even handle classes, but Mr. Yamashiri insisted that things would work out somehow. Sojiro had managed to pass the transfer exam after all. Barely.
ま、私には関係ないけど。
Aoko grumbled mentally as she walked down the hallway. She consoled herself with the fact that today would be the only day she'd spend with this boy out of time. Or at least she'd try to keep it that way.
青崎
He asked, calmly trying to get her
Nani?
attention.
こっちも一つ聞いていいかな
だから何？
俺の気のせいだと思うんだが君はまるで何かを睨んでいるように見えるやはり今朝は悪いものでも
His gaze revealed earnest concern as if asking her if she'd remembered to eat breakfast. It was like another hammer to her head. It is true that Aoko had been glaring at Sojiro the entire time. Glaring red-hot daggers, in fact. Not just at him, but the universe. Even on her best days, her roommate used to remark,
青子の視線は普通の人には厳しいわもう少し多くのことに寛大になるべきね
she'd been warned that her emotions were so naked on her face that people treated her like a powdered keg. How naive could the boy be that he could not pick up on this?
私をバカにしてるってわけじゃなさそうよね、この場合。
Even she found her own attempt to reassure herself unconvincing. It began to dawn on Aoko far too late. But compared to her, this laid-back transfer student might as well have been from another planet.
いいわ、言葉にしないとわからないようだから言うけど、あなたの気のせいじゃなくて、私は視線で遠回しに感情を表現してたの。いちいち声に出すのも会話にするのも面倒だから。
In response to her words, the Martian clapped his hands together.
なるほどどうしてそうしたいのかはわからないが確かに そっちの方が手っ取り早い意思表現だ。
Sojiro accepted her reasoning without argument, though he still had no idea what kinds of emotions she was trying to express. It was as if he could hear the words but didn't grasp the meaning. Ideas that should have connected were instead separated into blocks.
確かにずれてるわ、こいつ。
Yamashi's words made sense to her now. What was odd about this boy went way beyond Naivet. A stranger in a strange land he may be, but it was only civilized to forgive him some jet lag-induced confusion.
じゃ、とりあえずあなたの教室に行くから。
She had regained her composure. Soshiro raised his hand and stopped in his tracks.
あと一つ。
Aku waited for Soshiro to continue, but the boy was patient to a fault. She rubbed her forehead with her hand again, nursing a vague feeling of uneasiness.
これもちょっとした疑問なんだが、なんで君は怒ってるんだ？怒るのが商売とか、そういう家柄の人なのか？
What the fuck? Line of business. A long silence. Though she knew it wouldn't change the situation, she remembered her regret at answering the phone that morning. He meant no harm. She repeated this thought like a mantra in an attempt to keep her impulses in check.
別にあなたのせいじゃないから気にする必要はないわ。ただ、この一瞬とお昼まで眠っていた場合を計りにかけたら、あまりに利益の違いがあって頭を抱えただけよ。
To that vague answer, she started to walk again, turned and gazed away from this rude stranger named Sojiro Suzuki. While what constitutes normal is certainly up for debate, most would undoubtedly refer to him as so. He was a simple and nice boy with nondescript features. If he were an ice cream flavor, he would be vanilla. As Sojiro found Aoko to be very businesslike and full of life. There was a certain purpose to her movements, as they began and ended in an orderly fashion. The way her fingers raised when she pointed at things. The way she made her way across the hallways and classrooms. The way she would occasionally glance back at him to make sure he was keeping pace. Each and every movement was so impressive that he couldn't take his eyes off her. Aoko showed him to his homeroom, Class C of the 11th grade. The room certainly displayed more of a human touch than the previous meeting room, but Sojiro was none the wiser as to its function. Aoko gave a brief explanation before they visited individual subject classrooms as well as the gym, cafeteria, locker room, and school infirmary. Sojiro asked so many questions that much time passed before they reached the AV room on the second floor. What? The what room?
まずいな。
Sojiro stopped, looking genuinely
あ
concerned.
と20分経つと1時だ。
嘘でしょ？うちの校舎そんな広くないわよ。
The tour had begun around 10, which meant that 3 hours had passed. The tour of a school shouldn't take anywhere near that long.
そうだったわね。行く先々で根掘り葉掘り聞かれちゃ、そりゃ何時間でも経つわ。日が暮れていないのが不思議なくらいね。
Alfred glared at Sojiro. She was being sarcastic, of course, knowing full well he would never pick up on it. To her surprise, he looked unapologetically, unable to hide his rejection.
なんだこいつ。ちゃんとしてるっちゃ。
The guy before her now was nothing like earlier. In contrast to seeing his once impenetrable veneer when they first met, she found herself feeling sympathetic. Momentarily at least, until her irritation returned in full force.
で、何がまずいの？覚えることが多すぎてパンクした なんて言わないでね。
いや、それもあるけど、学校のことは別にして一時になるとまずいんだ。
Soju's gaze wandered as if worried about something. If he was worried about the weather, he would have a hard time seeing it as there were no windows in the hallway.
へえ、時間を気にするってことは用事があるのね。そう。人の予定を引っかき回しておいて自分だけ好きなようにやろうって言うんだ。なんだ、顔に似合わずいい人ね、君。
いや、褒めても何も出ないぞ。
誰も褒めちゃいないわよ。
She yelled at him, unable to hold back her fury.
で、
それで一体何の用なの？
Soju's face lit up as he finally understood what she was
そ
asking.
こは秘密にしておきたい。
He said with a perfectly straight face.
慣れ始めたつもりだったけど、こいつのこういったテンポには失神しそうになるわ。
Her frustration was natural. Still, she did everything she could to stifle her feelings and a fake smile. Fake smile.
しずきくん、
She took a step forward.
秘密だってば。
Feeling the mood change drastically, Soju took a step back. And another. And another. No matter how many steps he took back, she kept edging toward him. She was smiling, but he thought he could see the blood boiling beneath her skin.
これ最後の質問にしとくわね。あなた、私をからかって楽しい？
He had no intention of mocking her, though at this point he doubted presenting any evidence to prove this would do much to erase that forced smile on her
分かっ
face.
た。説明する。
His arms raised in surrender. She halted her advance and freed her face from that unseemly smile.
実は1時からアルバイトがあるんだ。でもここはそういうの禁止なんだろ？
そうだけど、あ、禁止されてるから秘密にしようと思ったの？バカね。それなら許可さえ下りていれば問題ないわよ。
知ってる。試験の時に許可をもらってる。
へえ。
Aoko's face lit up as she realized he might not be the piece of work she thought him to be. Yet,
しかし許可は一つしかもらえなかった。
一つって、あなた掛け持ちでバイトしてるの？
これでも2件減らしたんだ。生活費だけで大変なのに学費まで稼がなくちゃいけない。なのに働き先は一つだけというのはあんまりだと思わないか？
いや、あんまりなのはあなたの方だと思うけど。
though still irritated, her opinion of him changed a little. She was impressed that he was able to take care of his tuition and living expenses all on his own. She could also empathize with having no time to oneself. Her anger began to subside. The words part-time job were about the last things she ever expected to hear out of this country boy's mouth.
そういうことなら仕方ないわね。いいわ、行きなさいよ。事情は分かったから。
青崎はいいのか？
She had no idea what this question meant, but she at least understood he was trying to be considerate, which also took her by surprise. She feared he'd be just as dense about people's feelings as he was about everything else.
別に、私もこのまま帰るから。
First, though, she thought it best that they both stopped by the faculty room. Mr. Yamashiro had mentioned that the transfer procedures had already been completed, so all that remained was for him to sign off on her duties.
先生、案内終わりました。
それはお疲れ様。しずきくんもお疲れ様。それで校舎を回った感想はどうかな？
ありがとうございます。なんというかとても学校ですね。
そうかそうか。うん、明日から頑張りなさい。
She had no interest whatsoever in this pointless lab of meeting.
山城先生のことは気にしないでいいわ。教え子に厄介なことを押し付けてふんぞり返っているぐらい職員室が好きなんだから、何時間でも待ってるでしょ。いえ、待ってるべきじゃない？
そうか。青崎がいいんなら いいんだな。
ん
There it was again. Whatever Sojiro was getting at, Azuko had no idea.
それじゃあ行くよ。今日はありがとう。
今日だけよ、今日だけ。
Shooed him away with her hand. His face bent into a broad smile as if he found the gesture endearing. It was a softer expression that she had grown accustomed to seeing out of him. It was the kind of smile that would make anyone smile back. Well, most people at least. Aoko Ozaki did not betray the slightest hint of a smile. She's smiling in that FGO like picture of her. In her first Ascension art, at least as far as I remember. Unless I was imagining things. I'm confused now. What is this character? Why is she so angry? And what is she angry at? See, I believe she's a foreigner, no? Wait, what is that new character? Oh my god, they fucking finally released Kazura Drop. I guess that was bound to happen with the Fate Extra collab. Aozaki Aoko illustration. That does not look like the face of a very, very, very angry woman. I guess she changed as a person. Very super Aoko. Yeah, whatever.
それじゃあまた。
And with that friendly farewell, Sojiro walked toward the end of the hallway. Or so she thought before he turned into the next class over. Sojiro headed straight for one of the classroom's windows, whereupon he opened it with ease. The chilly November air filled the room as the soft sounds of the rain doubled in volume. In that instant, she realized his intention with opening the window. She really wished she hadn't.
いや、待て待て待て
He already had one leg out the window when she dashed to stop him.
何するつもりよ、あんたは。
何ってアルバイトに行くんだけど。
その窓は人が出入りするところじゃないの。だいたいここ何階だと思ってるの？
He saw the light of understanding dawn in his eyes.
死ぬところだった。2階から降りたら危なすぎる。
Oh my god, I almost died.
危ないのはあんたの頭。あのね、こっちじゃ窓から人は出入りしないの。さっき言っとくべきだったわ。
知ってるよ。時間がないんで慌ててたんだ。ありがとう。これからは気をつける。
Why do I feel like Sojiro is similar to Nanaya? A fucking mountainous tribe which hunts demons or some shit. He pulled his leg back inside and closed the window. His school uniform was soaking wet from the rain.
いいけど、私は別に。あなたがどこから外に出ようが関係ないもの。ただ、できれば私の前ではやらないでほしいだけよ。それより、あなた、本当に明日から学校に来るの？
来るよ。不安だけど案内してもらったし。
He bid her farewell before running away down the hallway. She hoped he would walk down the stairs and leave through the school entrance like a normal person.
大丈夫なのかあんなんで。
The image of him disappearing into the distance popped into her head in spite of her ire. She had no intention of spending any more time with him, and yet she felt strangely anxious. She couldn't tell if the feeling was fueled by concern or irritation. Why had she even gotten angry with this insignificant transfer student in the first place? A strange day with a strange transfer student resulting in strange emotions. Her head tilted as she reflected on what should have been a more enjoyable day than the irritating experience she just had.
いっか。どうせこれっきりなんだし。
Surely. The sound of the rain echoed quietly all around her. The grey sky seemed frozen in time. It was impossible to discern whether it was morning or evening. Mr. Yamashiro and Aoka were likely the only ones left at school. The unlit classroom looked overly gloomy and ominous as Aoka stood in it alone. She pulled up her left sleeve. Her dainty and remarkable watch showed that it was almost 1
時
o'clock.
間合ってる。
She looked out the window at the grounds below. She saw a boy in uniform running through the rain without an umbrella. A sight she must have seen before, but for whatever reason affected her far more than she wished. Aoko did not stop by the faculty room before heading home. While Mr. Yamashiro's offer to drive her home was tempting, she decided it would ultimately be far more satisfying to ruin his day just as he had hers. She walked as quietly as she could toward the entrance and opened her bright red umbrella. As she had predicted that morning, the rain was waning in the afternoon. At this rate, it would probably cease completely in an hour or so. The distant sunshine would likely have reached her by the time she arrived home.
ま、それも悪くないか。
She shrugged her shoulders in resignation. She neither liked nor disliked rain, but she found herself enjoying her walk home with her red umbrella in hand. The teachers at Misaki High School weren't fond of bright colors, so Aoko's red umbrella was an unusual sight. A ghost story about how the umbrella was once pure white had been making the rounds, but it featured Aoko instead of a ghost. It was with that umbrella that she made her way toward Misaki Station. What the fuck? What the fuck? Alright, moving on. Misaki Private High School took its namesake from the town it was in. The area was once a sprawl of farmland and woodland, But rapid growth over the last 10 years had led to an unprecedented modernization. Fuck, reading is hard. There were some who fought to preserve Misaki's natural treasures.
残すことには賛成ですが、それでは残すだけになってしまうでしょう。
With those words, the mayor snuffed out the voices of the minority and ushered in a long-term plan for a new urban development. More than enough funds for the urban development were collected, and the unassuming town of Misaki became the largest municipality of Misaki City in nearly 10 years. Even though it lacked the modernity of neighboring Yashirogi or the elegance of Misaki Hills.
それも当然よね。どういじくってももともとが山中の宿場町だし、山ごと切り崩すって言うんなら別だけど。
Urbanization had been contained to the lowlands around the station, with most of the hills and mountains still standing as they did 10 years prior. And this art is fucking incredible. The amount of work that goes into that detail, into every single fucking building down there. Handcrafted. Insane. The exhaustion of funds succeeded in protecting the old Misaki where the citizens could not. It became a truly odd suburban town, welcoming an increasingly urban population with its vestiges of old country charm. Misaki High School was a private school established long before the town's current state. The original campus, built 50 years ago, was located high up in the mountains, making its current location its second incarnation. The path to the old grounds was not only steep and remote, it had become an overgrown game trail with the passage of time. For these reasons, among others, Misaki High School had been shuttered until almost 20 years ago when it received a donation from a department store chain that allowed for the construction of a new campus in the city. And thus Misaki High School reopened its doors and the woodland campus forgotten. In fact, most of the students attending Misaki High School were not from Misaki at all. The hearty rustic people of this country town preferred prefectural schools to private ones. Truth be told, Aoko herself was one of them. All she had wanted after junior high was to move to Tokyo, where she hoped to spend her days touring her favorite bands on her way to entering a public university. But her hopes were dashed with her sister's departure, so here she was, walking alone in town with only a red umbrella to keep her company on what should have been a day off. I forget Aoko's sister's name, the redhead.
思い返してみると、
Maruno Kyokai.
私の人生ってなんか災難続きっぽい。
Her frustration evaporated into the cold December air.
でもま、いっか。退屈だけはしないわけだし。
With those words, her mood brightened a bit as she left the school in her wake. The busier part of town met her at the bottom of the gently sloping road. Misaki's train station was brand new. Bro, this game looks insane. I understand these are still images, but even then, this game just looks unbelievable. What's looking no prettier than an abandoned factory, it had been renovated into a multi-purpose structure with huge department stores on its east and west sides. When the department stores first opened, Aoko and her friends had been impressed with their modern feel, but in time the stores too became dated. She had no shopping to do today, so she passed them by. What she really wanted to do was rest at a cafe, but she fought the urge, knowing her roommate would never let her hit the end of it if she frittered away her money. looked back and blinked. For just a moment, she could have sworn she had seen someone suspicious in a red dress out of the corner of her eye. It must have been her imagination. The sixth sense chill she was experiencing down her spine was a familiar one at this point. She continued her walk home, brushing off the event as if it had never happened. In time, the chill faded, and all that was left were the sounds of the town. She sighed heavily. Had she imagined it? Even if it had all been in her head, she was far from comfortable with yelling, with a feeling that still lingered.
夏場の方ってもう少しこう
She grumbled under her breath.
波乱万丈、商売繁盛、諸行無常と。そうそう、忙しさに愚痴を言っても始まらないわ。
Fortunately, Summer and Bugs were hand in hand. She could see how Bugs could be drawn to all the sweet fruit. Rank with grease and heat, the kitchen was closed for the time being. The lunch rush had come and gone. But one last battle remained: dinner time. Only after the evening chaos could the kitchen crew remove their white armor and call it a day. In the midst of the war zone was a lone newcomer.
これ着るんですか？
His voice was uneasy, betraying how new he was.
気持ちはわかる。俺もどうかと思うけど、店長の言うことだからもう笑顔で乗り越えてくれ。これも商店街の明日のためなんだとよ。本気で申し訳ないんだが、雨も止んだし、なんとか行ってきてくれないか。無事帰ってきたら晩飯おごってやっから。
His bright orange co-worker clasped his hands together as if to beg for forgiveness as he saddled him with this unreasonable task. Ten years ago, Misaki City was a town of farm and woodland. I am just awestruck by the art in this game. Every inch of it. Fuck. I don't think visual novel art was ever expected to be this good at any point in time. But everything had changed when the Shadow Nation attacked. Fire Nation, right? The front of the station was now lined with tall, multi-story buildings, and the residential areas were similarly full of apartment complexes. The once rustic scenery around the station had long become a thing of the past. Shiroi Inozuka was the only place in the city that still contained vestiges of the old town, a pocket of the past inside an urban jungle. The road extended up a conspicuously high hill to an old residential district far from the hustle and bustle of the train station. Long ago, it had been considered unwise to build on high ground, so nobody lived above a certain elevation. Shiroi Inozuka, sitting as it did atop a hill in the middle of town, was no exception to that convention and had no residences to speak of. The asphalt continued for some time, eventually giving way to a mountain road that was swallowed into the cover of trees. A lone vending machine stood to mark the boundary between town and beyond. Even the children knew that there was nothing beyond the new playground in development that so enthralled them. Well, that was not entirely true. There was nothing beside the haunted house. Aoko Ozaki traversed the long slope. Below her, she could see the whole of Misaki. The symmetrical town looked like a miniature set from this height. It would look like a painting if there had been a sea next to it, but unfortunately Misaki City was very much landlocked. While it was overcast at the moment, the scene was quite breathtaking on clear evenings. The view was the one thing that made the arduous climb worthwhile, and today she had been denied even that.
ああ、雨の日は自転車も使えないし、1日に2回ぐらいバスでも通ってくれないもんかな、ほんと。
Aoko had been using this road to get to school for almost 2 years now, but the journey had never gotten easier.
あれ、鍵閉まったまま？アリス、まだ帰ってきてないんだ。
With a weary shrug, she put her hand on the rusty iron fence. Quietly, the heavy gate swung open as if to welcome her home. There sits atop that hill a haunted house. That is how the story much shared around town used to begin. And fresh rumors about the house had sprung to life almost as fast as the town's modernization. What is this music? Where is it from? Where is this piano from? It sounds so familiar. Feels like I've heard this very, very recently. Despite being dilapidated and abandoned for many years, lights can be seen inside the house at night. An angry murder of crows often gathers atop the hill before mysteriously vanishing. Children get lost in the fog, never to be seen again. Late at night, a shrieking sound can be heard all the way to town. This particular piece of slander was the one Naoko wished to discredit the most. Its final rumor was of an eye-catching luxury car that sometimes made its way up and down the hill. The rumors spread and grew by the day. And while they grew, the house that everyone thought had rotted away was restored over the recent years. Deep in a wood top of a hill no one dared to approach. Like a ruin shrouded from view even on the brightest of days, stood a relic out of time, a building from a fairy tale. The house was the Kuonji mansion. Everyone in town knew about the witch's house on the hill. It was an unabashedly haunted house where Aoko Ozaki resided, for reasons known only to her. Needless to say, it was not really haunted. The Kuonji family home was a grand Western-style mansion with a long and storied history, stretching all the way back to England. It was too small to be a dormitory, yet too big to be called a house. The main building contained as many as 3 normal houses' worth of rooms and was surrounded by a large, all-encompassing courtyard. The perimeter of the grounds was surrounded by a high iron fence covered in thorny vines. There was also an annex to the main building. Given such extravagance, it was no wonder that it inspired rumors. To the town residents, the mere existence of such a lavish and out-of-place mansion on top of the hill was a cause for suspicion. Rumors, lies, and slander were the prices to be paid for fame. With only 2 lodgers, it was hard to disagree with the perception that vampires must be living here. That's going hard on the Tsukihime nods there. Why is it stuck?
ま、私はともかく、アリスはそういうのやりかねないし。
She put her hand on the front door. It was a grand double door that would have paired well with a brass lock. And yet it was secured with little more than a simple keyhole. Pushing it open with one hand, she entered the supposedly haunted house. By the way, vampires were not enough to scare you, ghosts were known to appear on certain nights. Man, this game is really going hard on the fucking piano. Much like the weather outside, the foyer was overcast with shades of grey. Perhaps by deliberate design, the architect had chosen not to include any lights in the entrance area. The ceiling was 2 floors high. The only light in the room came from the skylight. It was particularly gloomy on rainy days. On moonless nights, it was like the world itself ceased to be. Aoko decided the drawing room to the east would be a good place to rest, but knowing that she would not be able to relax until she changed clothes, she started up the stairs. The stairs curled up the wall to the second floor hall. There was a third floor attic as well, accessible from the far end of the hall. She had never set foot in there in the 2 years she had lived here, though. The Kuonji mansion was more or less divided into 2 wings, east and west. Aoko had been given the entire east wing, but 2 rooms were more than enough as far as she was concerned. She had no desire to open a door that would trap you in a storybook world or lead to an attic that had only been used for stories these last 5 years. That is an impressive visual, especially for a still image. Aoko's room was at the end of the east wing's long corridor. She had elected for a smaller room for no other reason than that she thought it would be easier to clean. With some guitars there. It was furnished with a large bed, her beloved mahogany desk, a wardrobe and chest for her clothes, and 2 9-shelf bookcases. That was the extent of what she had brought from home. Her entire life of 16 years, reduced to this. She'd also borrowed the next room down for her own purposes.
そうだ、アリスにもらった見張りと壊れてないかチェックしないと。
She needed to see if the project she had been working on all night had borne fruit. The study next door served as proof of the life she had been living for the last year and how different that life was from the one she had lived before. It was not a room for the person she had been. It was a room for the person she would eventually become. A place of solitude that only she could enter, or so she thought.
壊れてるどころか跡形もなく消え去ってる。やっぱ自己流アレンジはまだ早かったか。いいわよ、笑いなさいよ、コマドリ。
The nosy neighbor that had intruded upon her sanctuary flew away. While not exceptionally talented, Ako did not lack for effort and was not afraid to fail. One could have almost mistaken her approach for optimism. She changed out of her uniform and returned to the first floor. Okay, it's a fucking Tsukihime turtleneck. Impressive. Arcade room's clothing action. Down the stairs, she opened the door to the east wing into the corridor as dark as a cellar. The absence of windows meant it was pitch black without the lights on, so she flicked the switch and entered the nearby doorway.
Denkiのない生活か。想像したくないな。
It had been her idea to update the drawing room. The walls were decorated with extravagant patterns, and around the room were large, majestic sofas and a luxurious Persian rug. Amidst it all was a 30-inch television that seemed completely out of place. That is not a 30-inch television, more like a 13-inch CRT, motherfucker. What is that? It's still looking over the other furniture like the emperor with no clothes. The mansion's owner would have rather done without it, but to a commoner like Aoko it was an essential commodity. They had fought over its presence at first, but eventually came to an agreement and now mutually enjoyed this modern comfort.
なんだ、人のことは言えないか。うちも案外時代錯誤な家だった。
Now in a somewhat pleasant mood, she decided to brew some tea. She boiled some water in the kitchen, prepared a teapot, and made herself some black tea. With a flop, she sank into the sofa. She took a sip of her tea and then another. Brother, these are such fucking incredible images. These are world fucking shattering images. This game is incredible. This art is fucking turning me belligerent. All I can do is praise it. Lulled by the ticking of the clock, she took a third sip as she pondered how to spend her afternoon. The sofa almost seemed to be inviting her, and she sunk even further into its comforting embrace. Aoko blearily opened her eyes as she lifted her body up from the cushions.
Asagami Fujino? This was no dream or delusion. At some point, the girl had sat down across from her. Not the least bit surprised, she reached for her teacup, but the tea within had gone completely cold. She asked the same question to the girl on the other side of the table. The girl answered without lifting her gaze. In silence, she could have been mistaken for a beautiful doll. The girl sitting on the opposite sofa was really an old book. She had delicate limbs and pale white skin. Not a hint of humanity emanated from her melancholic aura. She had darker hair than Aoko, and her icy eyes were focused on the pages in front of her. Her clothes resembled that of a nun, but were actually her school uniform. In Aoko's humble opinion, the gloominess suited her. She evoked something like out of a painting. There was something unreal about her, as if she were frozen in time. The white of her gently arched neck was so lovely that even Aoko found herself enchanted by it. What is happening? The girl was one of the haunted house's 2 residents. Her name was Alice Kuonji, and she was the same age as Aoko.
私どれくらい寝てた？
1時間と少し。ここで眠ると風邪ひくわよ。
Alice answered indifferently, not that it bothered Aoko, who was now used to it. She looked at the clock on the wall and saw that it was already 7. She had been asleep for 2 hours. The day had been a rough one for her, and she had slept little the night before, so it was no surprise that she had dozed off for as long as she had.
起こしてくれてもよかったのに。せっかくの紅茶が冷めちゃったじゃない。
私が来た時はもう冷めてたわ。
でしょうね。行ってみただけよ。
Aoko drank down the rest of the cold tea in one gulp. The poorly heated Konji mansion, that was more than enough to clear her head and wake up.
こうなるとフォートナム&メイソンも何もないわね。おかえりアリス。玉の贅沢もあんた抜きじゃ閉まらないってことかしら。今日は薬日か天中殺か。ちょっと早いけどお参りってのも十分ありかもね。
Aoko shrugged her shoulders as if resigning herself to her fate.
それで何があったの？
After 2 years together, they knew each other quite well. Aoko had one way of asking questions, and Alice had another. Alice asked without raising her head, and Aoko gave her the details.
まず謝らなくちゃいけない。昨日徹夜で完成させた例のあれ、意味がなくなっちゃったのよ。ちょっと目を離した隙に沸騰しすぎて壊れちゃったみたい。そうならないよう循環のコードを 2,3 本外したり縫合したりしたんだけど。
Aoko tried to laugh it off as if it was someone else's problem.
どういうこと？
今朝休養が入って学校に呼び出し受けたの。そこで転入生の世話を押し付けられて1日が無残にも消費されちゃって、帰ってきたら 跡形もなく消えてました。怒る？アリス。
別に青子の器物破損にいちいち怒っていたら一生分の口論をすることになるでしょ。代用品はあるからまた一から始めればいいわ。それより怒ってるのはあなたの方じゃないの？
Alice was very much on point today. It was true that despite outward appearances, Aoko was seething with frustration. That aside,
この転入生っていうのがひどくずれててね。すごい山奥で暮らしてたらしくて、こっちの常識が通じないんだから。三問以下いって言葉があるけど、あれって本当のことなのね、アリス。
Alice raised her head in response to hearing her name. But Aoko kept going on before she could get a word in edgewise. Aoko, after all, expected no sympathy in the first place.
初対面から尺に触るやつだったけど、教室を案内した時なんか失神しそうになったわ。そいつ教室で教師と1対1で授業を受けるもんだと思ってたらしいの。それはそれでまだ流せる。許容範囲よ、あの程度の冗談は。で、私が簡潔かつ丁寧に教室の何たるかを教えた後で、そいつなんて言ったと思う？それで青崎、他の教室は何に使うんだ？ですって。教室に他も何もないでしょ？なんていうか、そいつは少しでも説明を怠るとそのままで納得しちゃうのよ。何も疑問に思わないというか、想像力が欠如してるっていうか、想像することに慣れてないっていうか。まあ一度言ったことはちゃんと分かってるっぽいからバカってわけじゃないんだけど。
あなたが人を批評するのは珍しいわね。そういうダメな人気にするたちだったの？
みじんたりとも気にしないわよ。けど明日からどんな間違いをしでかすのかちょっと心配なだけ。
What she was really worried about was having to clean up that mess if and when it happened. That had to be it. If not, it would mean she had no real idea why she could not get him out of his head.
とにかく変なやつなの。案外アリスと気が合うかも。
三問異解はいい言葉ね。
But from her eyes, it was clear that the question of whether they would get along was irrelevant, given that they would never meet in the first place. Aoko gave an uncommitted response.
ところでアリス、さっきから何読んでるの？
霊的進化論の二次創作、スピリチュアルダイアリのまがいもの。
This is likely going to expand upon the clock tower a little, which I believe a combination of Mahotsukai no Yoru and the Adventures of El Malloy are supposed to do. Unfortunately, there's no way for me to consume the Adventures of El Malloy, which is a shame. Wish I knew Japanese.
ああ、スウェーデンボリー。そんなの今更読んでも仕方ないんじゃない？
新書なら退屈だけど、これは偽書だから。彼の欠点と長所を劇的に褒め上げている。よくできた冒険小説のようよ。立ちはだかる秘密組織の名前がカントとか気が利いているわ。筆跡はあなたのおじいさんのものだけど。
へえ、あの人そういう趣味まであったんだ。割とユーモアがあったのね。惜しい人を亡くしたわ。
Aoko seem nostalgic over her now deceased grandfather.
あなたのおじいさん夏に頼りをくれたけど。
よしてよ、死んだものと考えたいのに。
Aoko sighed and laid back on the sofa. The soft cushions caved in under her weight.
話は戻るけど、
He doesn't look that fat. As I was saying, Alice shot a glance at Aoko. Her body buried in the sofa remained as still as a corpse. It was clear Aoko had tuned out of the conversation. Alice silently chastised her with a look. The more she thought about it, the less important the events of the day seemed to become. If she just ignored Alice, the conversation would end there. They'd eventually get up and leave today's mistake hunches off for another day. However, that's not the kind of person Aoko Aozaki was.
いいわよ。何？
She asked, still lying down.
今日できなかったのは少し痛いわね。
だから反省してるって。学校優先は一人前になってからでしょ。
ならいいけど。
The coldness in her voice made Aoko gnash her teeth. She knew what Alice wanted to say. She knew better than anyone. The veneer she wore for school was different than the way she lived at home. While it could be called hiding in plain sight, Alice thought it was silly. And what that silence told her was,
覚悟を決めろって言いたいのよね、あんたは。
today's failure was not a colossal one. She just happened to upset the delicate balance between her home and school lives, chasing one at the expense of the other. And yet that careless mistake was a clear sign of Aoko's lack of commitment.
アリスは関係ない。これは私が私で決めなくちゃいけないこと。
She had only known for sure for the last year and a half, but she'd had a hunch for as long as she could remember. Make the choice, and the day will come. It was little wonder that her morals and conscience had been stripped away. Aoko pushed herself back up. She was met by Alice's cold beauty and worldless gaze.
OK、アリス。来週中に決着をつけよう。それでいいんでしょ？
ええ、青子がいいなら。
What does Alice look like in the FGO art, I wonder? I forgot. And why does Aoko have a smile on her face? That doesn't seem likely. Konji Alisu. Let's see the illustration then. What the? What is that? Intriguing. Yui Shosetsu, why does that name sound familiar? Oh my god, Yui Shosetsu, that's a character that actually puts on clothes rather than putting off clothes with illustration. What the fuck? I'm shook. Moving on. Ako could not help but shake her head, feeling like she was hearing something similar for the second time that day. Even in the comfort of her own, she couldn't banish thoughts of that country boy from her mind.
じゃあ下準備はよろしくね。私まだできないし。
場所は例の公園でいい？
妥当な線ね。あ、でももう一軒の方は？そっちの方が急務じゃない？
時と場合、森に変化があれば教えるわ。
After that brief exchange, Alice returned her attention to the book on her lap. Shop talk was over. Now they could return to the normal relationship as roommates. Alco grabbed the remote and turned on the TV. Since Alice was busy reading, Alco decided to tune into a variety show that had already started. Alice started to speak but suddenly cut herself off. One of her delicate hands raised to her mouth. She would always cut herself off the second she realized she was about to say something trivial. Is that why she hates small talk? Impressive. Triviality is a part of life. Sometimes self-restraint could hit too late and she would make a gesture like the one she was making now. It occurred to Alco that the ass on her cute roommate made just now was different than the wash she blurted in times past. What is this observation? What the
何？
Alco turned down the volume on the TV. Her intense eyes lit up like those of a mischievous cat. Oh my god. Why cat? Why everything I do today seems to have something to do with cats?
どうということはないんだけど。
ないんだけど？
Alice looked away bashfully, not knowing if she could bring it up or not. It's times like these that her expression carried a real warmth and surprising charm. If he could see her in this moment, Alice's father would have to admit that her name suited her perfectly.
今日帰ってくるときおかしなものを見て誰かに話そうと思っていたんだけど。
Alco nodded, beckoning her to continue.
つまらない、本当に意味のないことよ。けどどう考えてもそんなことをする理由がわからない。青子、人間ぐらいの大きな猫がひょこひょこ出前をする理由ってわかる？
For a second, Alco thought Alice was trying and failing miserably to make a joke again. One would think that about anyone, really. But she seemed completely serious. Even if Alice's sense of humor fell flat for Alco, the story already sounded more fanciful than Alice's usual attempt at jokes. Alco concluded that her roommate was talking about something she had actually seen.
その話には2つぐらい信じがたい部分があるけど、1つずつ論破していい？
いいの。私もからくりぐらいは思いつくから。ただ理由がわからないから聞いてるの。わざわざ精巧な猫のぬいぐるみを着て出前のてんやものを届けに行くことってそんなに簡単かしらね。
難易度以前にそれをやる人間の常識性を疑うけどね、私は。
Alice nodded tentatively at her words.
まあ世の中いろいろあるから、私たちみたいなのもいれば、下界から遮断された山奥で暮らしていたやつまで10人十色よ。私だったら見かけたら声かけて理由を尋ねただろうけど。
Alice's gaze drifted at that.
ふーん、暮れゆく住宅街にさまよう出前猫か。背景が夕焼けだったらファンタジーだったでしょうに。で、今日の夕飯どうする？せっかく話が出たし、私らもてんやものにしようか。
Uncle looked getting takeout and her face glowed as she spoke. Where did that drop of water come from on my fucking face? What happened? They had no hard rules for dinner, but if one of them was in the mood to cook, they made it a point to make enough for two. At the very worst, this meant their entire weeks without dinner, but the two of them agreed that this was the system that worked best for them. Whether they found cooking to be too much effort or simply liked ordering out, nights like this one were a common occurrence, much to the chagrin of the restaurants of Misaki Town. Delivering to the mansion meant coming all the way up to the top of this hill, the source of their discontent.
時間は8時前。ギリギリセーフね。私今月がいいな。あそこの月見そば最近ご無沙汰だったし。
The Hungry Student Council president laid out a stack of takeout menus like she might fan a deck of cards, and excitedly scanned for anything that stood out. Alice casually responded without paying so much as a glance.
悪いけど私夕飯済んでるの。
What the fuck? কি স্ক্যাম না করলো? With those words, Aoko froze. All deliveries required a minimum of 2 items, so she was out of luck without an accomplice. Cruel Society had decided it couldn't be bothered to deliver to a princess who only ordered a single serving of food. Incidentally, to counteract orders from the Hilltop Mansion, the restaurants had declared the minimum number of orders will be 3 starting next year. Aoko and Alice were still in the dark to this fiendish change in direction.
この裏切り者だから帰ってくるのが遅かったのね。帰宅部、学校までバス徒歩込みで片道20分のあんたがなんで5時以降に帰ってくんのか考えるべきだったわ。
Fortunately for Aoko, she had been too out of it to even remember that she was the one who had fallen asleep.
ああ、ひどい女。そういう時は残された一人のためにお土産買ってくるのが暗黙の了解だったのに。私だってこの前の外食の時はアリスの分も買ってきたじゃない。
It was unknown how serious Aoko was being, but she was visibly angry. She had already woken up hungry that morning, and from the time she was called into school until now, she had consumed nothing but tea. It was a small miracle that her stomach was not growling. That is roughly 20 or so hours, I would say, without food at the very least, if not 24. And all she's consumed is tea. Her stomach shouldn't be growling, it should be fucking dying from drinking tea on an empty stomach. That's insane. Hungry for 24 hours is fine though. But tea? What the fuck? Hunger is a minor issue until 36 hours. She knew it was her own fault, but she persisted, wanting to get revenge on Alice for scolding her earlier.
この前ってあれのこと？あなたが都心に出向いた時、夕食にお寿司を食べてきたのに、お土産はなぜかコンビニエンスストアのビニール袋だったって話？
Aoko had kicked a hornet's nest.
何よ、買ってこないよりはマシでしょ。
真実は時に隠蔽すべきね。
Alice's icy gaze pierced right through her. Aoko had certainly crossed a line by going on and on about how the sushi circled around the restaurant while Alice ate her convenience store meal. But now things...
わかった、わかりました。じゃあ今回のは前のと帳消しってことでいいわね。
But now things fascinated her. But new things fascinated her, and she couldn't contain her curiosity towards the conveyor belt sushi shops that started popping up at the time. They were nothing short of miraculous. Even honesty can be a sin given the right circumstances. Alice went back to her book without so much as recognizing the question. The fact that she did not confirm it made Aoko anxious.
仕方ない。今日は薬日だし、おとなしく台所に立って料理の腕を磨くとしましょう。
She stood up, announcing her intent to do no one in particular.
聞き忘れてた。アリス、どこで夕食済ませたの？
Alice's hand froze on her current page. She suddenly shut the book she was reading and stood up as if at wit's end. She walked across the drawing room with a book in hand. When she reached the door, she stopped and turned toward Aoko.
聞きたい？
まあ、なんとなく。
Aoko nodded timidly, cowed by Alice's sudden vigor. Alice continued in her matter-of-fact way.
その猫が余ったメニューをくれたのよ。
And with that brief response, she left the room. Oh, you, I got a Steam achievement. What is this? Morning in the city moved incredibly fast. It made one wonder if it was even a morning at all, with people so bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. You know what? I'm gonna stop reading at this point. It is getting a little tiring. I'm also gonna stop the stream here. If you want to experience the rest of the game, you can play it yourself, I suppose.